You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, January 2nd, 2018, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you had a great time. I want to offer my thanks to Oklahoma and, who was the other? Oklahoma and Georgia for playing the second best college football bowl game I've ever seen. Of course, Boise State Fiesta Bowl 2007, number one. A couple quick things, though, about college football before we get to the marijuana. We've got an all-SEC national championship, Georgia versus Alabama. I'm calling it SEC Championship 2, the do-over. And I'm just upset about this because if it's going to be a national championship, let's have all the nation available to compete. Ohio State got screwed in this deal. They won their conference and they're sitting on the outside. Alabama didn't even win its division and they get to compete for the national championship. Not a knock on Alabama. They're a fantastic team. They're an amazing team. But if it's a national championship, for college, then the conference championship should mean something. I feel bad for Auburn, too, being forced to play a conference championship that knocked it out of the national playoff scene. So enough about that. Also, I want to make a quick note on the coverage, the news coverage of January 1st being the first legal day of cannabis sales in the state of California. And during their coverage, I caught a little bit of a party bus. I don't know if this is in Colorado or in California. I'm not sure where they were filming from, but they were in a party bus, CNN, in a party bus where people were smoking cannabis live on TV. The anchor is holding up a gas mask bong. And I got to think that somebody in Kentucky or Louisiana or Florida or some other place sitting in jail for having sold weed or smoked weed, how that visual must have looked to them. Everybody kicking back and celebrating with legal weed while they're still sitting in a jail. Folks, it's not truly legalized until we are equal with beer drinkers and cigar smokers and all of our drug war POWs come home. Today on the show, we're going to tell you a great tale about a marijuana activist mom, a medical marijuana mom who fought the state to get her kid back and won. We've got a new story from Angela Bacca discussing the agricultural commodity that is cannabis. But first, let's get to the cannabis headline news.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, January 2nd, 2018. I'm Russ Belville. California began its first sales of legal recreational marijuana on Monday, New Year's Day. While San Francisco and Los Angeles lacked any licensed shops, San Jose and Berkeley shops with licenses sold their first recreational cannabis to pioneering marijuana attorney Henry Wachowski and the first family of California marijuana activism, Chris Conrad and Mickey Norris. The state began issuing temporary licenses ahead of its January 1 mandate, according to the California Cannabis Bureau. In addition to more than 400 licenses issued by the Bureau, over 4,400 users have registered with the Bureau's online system, and more than 1,800 applications have been submitted. Meanwhile, the U.S. Border Patrol, which operates within 100 miles of the U.S. borders with Mexico and the Pacific Ocean, says, quote, "Nothing has changed on our end," end quote, and will continue to prosecute and confiscate marijuana at its 8 California checkpoints. Marijuana Policy Project founder Rob Kampia is no longer employed by or serves on the board of the organization. He is starting a new cannabis policy group called Marijuana Leadership Campaign, or MLC, structured as a for-profit LLC consulting firm. The new company, quote, "will focus almost exclusively on changing U.S. laws," end quote, Kampia said in a relatively unusual memo shared with Marijuana Moment late Saturday night, which also says that the firm has lined up, quote, nearly $500,000 in seed money from, quote, a marijuana marijuana investment firm in Los Angeles, a major marijuana dispensary in Colorado, Kampia's wealthy friends in Texas, where he lives half-time, and a coalition of new donors in South Carolina, end quote. The split with MPP is occurring as greater attention is being paid to past allegations of sexual misconduct by Kampia amidst a national backlash against workplace sexual harassment and abuse. The memo appears to lay out the case that Kampia's departure from MPP has nothing to do with any old or new allegations of sexual misconduct or with rumors of a new sexual misconduct story coming out soon in a major newspaper. Kampia acknowledged in the interview that he, quote, did know there was a story in the works somewhere, end quote. A son of Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson is among those with ties to the state's burgeoning medical marijuana industry, according to documents unveiled this week. Asa Hutchinson III is the listed agent for DB Science LLC on an application for a cultivation facility in Washington County. The younger Hutchinson is an attorney in that county and a son of the governor. The younger Hutchinson also is listed as the incorporator organizer of DB Science LLC under its business listing with the Secretary of State's office. Governor Hutchinson, a Republican who formerly headed the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, publicly opposed Issue 6, the ballot initiative that Arkansas voters approved in November in 2016 to legalize medical marijuana. A handful of lawmakers are proposing changes to some of New Hampshire's policies on marijuana in 2018. In September, possessing 3/4 of an ounce of marijuana became a violation rather than a crime. Those caught get a $100 fine and no jail time. But before the law changed, people were arrested for having this amount, and that arrest remains on their records. Senate Minority Leader Jeff Whitburn, a Democrat from Whitefield, and 12 other lawmakers from both parties want to change that. There's also a bill allowing qualified patients under the state's medical marijuana law to grow their own cannabis. Meanwhile, in neighboring Vermont, the House Judiciary Committee will discuss a pending state-passed marijuana legalization bill on Wednesday. The full body is expected to vote later in the week on sending the measure to Governor Phil Scott, a Republican, who has pledged to sign it. Organizers of two primary efforts to get marijuana legalization on the Florida 2018 ballot say they won't come close to collecting the required 766,000 petition signatures by the February 1st deadline. The groups now hope that 2020 will be their year. Quote, we're going to continue on, said Michael Minardi, a Tampa attorney who leads Regulate Florida, which is proposing a constitutional amendment that would allow Floridians over the age of 21 to use, cultivate, and sell marijuana. A separate pro-legalization group, Floridians for Freedom, wants to make cannabis cultivation, possession, and use a basic right for adults over 21 under Article 1 of the Florida Constitution. Florida would likely join Michigan as states looking to legalize through voter initiative in 2020. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Tuesday, January 2nd, 2018. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. The Marijuana Agenda is a listener-supported independent podcast brought to you by Radical Russ Media, LLC. Subscribe to our VIP feed at mjagenda.com for access to our ad-free podcast segment archive. Make a one-time donation to support the Marijuana Agenda at paypal.me/radicalruss. You're not high. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm astonished to hear people suggest we can solve our heroin crisis. Have you heard this? By having more marijuana.
Okay, maybe you're a little high.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855.
People should say no to drug use.
It's really, really easy.
Adding more gasoline to the fire.
Lackadaisical. Really tough, really big, really great.
To infect and rot our nation from within.
Dangerous gateway drugs.
We don't need to be legalizing marijuana.
To build and grow a stronger, healthier, and drug-free society.
In the news.
Today in What in the News, let's take a look at what's been happening over the past couple of weeks. We've been off the air here at the Marijuana Agenda. First, I want to get to California and offer my congratulations to everyone there in the Golden State who is now enjoying legal cannabis. Congratulations, and it's amazing how good it feels to buy your first legal cannabis. And the looks that you see on people's faces when they get to make their first purchase are just priceless. I've had the opportunity to see that happen now in Washington State and here in Oregon when they started their first legal sales, and it's just an amazing thing. That said, holy crap, have you seen the prices? There were people buying eighths for as much as $60 when you add in all the taxes. And of course, some of that is the high taxes that the states themselves put on the marijuana, as high as 37% in the state of Washington. But it's also a fact that the federal government adds a tax burden to these marijuana businesses in that they don't get to deduct their regular cost of goods sold. They don't get to deduct their regular business expenses that almost every other business gets to deduct. According to Calico Castile from the National Cannabis Industries Association, in a tweet earlier today, he mentioned that there's an effective tax burden laid on by the federal government of up to 70%. 70% taxation because of the lack of financial access to banks, the lack of being able to deduct these standard business deductions. And this is just untenable. One of the big things that is going on as we legalize is the constant refrain from our opponents that legalization will never wipe out the black market. The black market is still thriving. There'll always be a black market. And if we continue to regulate cannabis like this, yeah, absolutely, there will continue to be a black market. I know plenty of people willing to sell you an eighth of marijuana for under $60. Okay. So how long can this continue? And for how long will this continued false valuation of marijuana's price lead to people believing that's just what it should cost? This has been a big concern of mine because I've never believed that marijuana should cost $300 an ounce. Even under prohibition, I've never believed that marijuana should have cost $300 an ounce. And what you get when you talk to people back then, I used to talk to my weed dealer, my weed grower, and like, dude, why is it so expensive? Why does it cost $300 an ounce? Well, that's what the market will bear. I always heard that. That's what the market will bear. And of course, the market would bear that because most people were terrified of growing marijuana in their own homes, growing cannabis in their own homes, and subjecting themselves to the risk of felonies. Most people were afraid to get a whole lot of marijuana at one time, buying it in eighths and halves and so forth, because of the fear of extra prosecution and possible jail time for possession of greater amounts. That's why the market would bear a $300 ounce. Never once did I see any growers back in Prohibition deciding to cut that price down to what their production cost was, plus a reasonable amount to be making some profit on. Reasonable in the realm of what most retailers, most producers of legal products get, which is, 10%, 20% at best when they're talking about these markups. Never once was there an altruistic grower out there who said, you know what, we could help overgrow the government and destroy all their talking points about prohibition if we dropped our prices, if we made it cheaper. Never happened. Never happened because the growers and the dealers wanted to gouge the consumers for every dollar they could get. They wanted to take advantage of every bit of that prohibition price subsidy that they could get. So now, when marijuana is legal, now, when companies can be formed to get licenses and use economy of scale and to be able to manufacture cannabis at far lower rates, those same growers who told me for 27 years that I've been smoking pot now that we just had to accept what the market will bear, don't seem to be whistling that same tune anymore, do they? Because what the market will bear now, I've seen in signs around here in Oregon, some of these shops selling ounces for as low as $79. Yeah, it's outdoor, sun-grown, and not top shelf stuff, but still, neither was the stuff I was picking up in bags in the black market that were charging me $300 for either. So we're going to talk about this more when we get to our next segment, or our last segment, the Radical Rant, because investigative journalist Angela Bacca, a friend of mine, has written a great piece up on Brightside discussing how agricultural commodities work. And I'm going to give you a little bit from that piece because I think this is a message that more people are going to have to understand and hear. And consumers out there are going to have to get it through their head that $20 for a gram of marijuana is insane. It's insane to pay that much money for marijuana. And I know as we've legalized it and it's a new, fresh, kind of enjoyable commodity here and the new hottest thing, people will be eager to pay that $20 a gram, that $30 a gram, whatever, for the novelty of it. I'm just hoping after a few years and after so many states have legalized, I mean, we get Michigan and Florida in 2020. If we get Vermont and New Jersey and Connecticut and Rhode Island leading up to that, I'm hoping there's enough population of consumers and enough awareness about this product to understand that the price of weed is too damn high. Now, another piece in the news that I wanted to get to is the departure of Rob Kampia from Marijuana Policy Project. What a strange, twisted tale this has been. So it started off 2-3 weeks ago when it was announced that Rob was stepping down as executive director and MPP was creating a new position for him, kind of a diagonal shift, director of strategic initiatives or something. Basically, we want to keep you on because you're so good at getting rich people to give us money. But this whole thing about you being hypersexual is going to be a big, big controversy given what's going on with Me Too and the Harvey Weinstein thing. And nobody couldn't see that, right? Everybody could see this was just transparently an attempt to get the PR scandal from tainting the marijuana movement in general and Marijuana Policy Project in particular. So it was no surprise that a couple weeks later, just this last Saturday night, we get a new announcement that, oh, no, he's not staying with MPP. He's dropping out of MPP to form his own little rich guys club, the Marijuana Leadership Council or whatever the hell it's called. So he and his rich buddies can find out ways to legalize states to make sure they don't have home grow and make sure that everything favors the producers and favors the growers. So rich white guys can get even richer. So it's no surprise to me that this is happening. I'll be interested to see whether or not groups like Drug Policy Alliance, Marijuana Policy Project, and these states will just be more than willing to look past all the sexual misconduct and keep getting the money spigot from Uncle Rob. We shall see, though. The rumor out there is that there's a new piece coming out. And last I heard, it was Boston Globe that was working on this, but I can't confirm that. But the rumor is that there's a new piece out that digs into further sexual misconduct problems of Rob Campia's since the 2010 or 11 incident, where he supposedly got 3 months of therapy for his hypersexuality that apparently didn't cure him. Maybe just taught him to be a little more circumspect about it. In fact, over the weekend, I was privy to seeing a email that Rob had written on company email using his signature as executive director to continue his predatory ways of trying to bed the latest hot young staffer. This was 2012, by the way, after the 3-month hypersexuality treatment. So I'm not buying it. I've never liked the guy. I was in a presentation he gave in 2007 that was called How Fundraising is Like Dating. And the whole point, there was like 19 points on it that read like a manual from one of those men's rights activist pickup artist type people, right? Hey, don't let your funder think you're only after one thing. If you really want to get what your funder has to offer, you have to show that you're interested in more than just their money, right? This is the way the guy thinks about women and thinks about sex, is that you have to fool them. You have to trick them to get what you really want. Hey, it's fine being a shark, right? You want to be a shark, you want to be a predator, that's great, especially if your prey is rich white men who want to donate to marijuana legalization. But when your prey are young interns, young staffers, women who are fresh to the marijuana movement, who look up to you as a leader, who look up to you as a visionary, who desire to get further on in their careers, when you do things like that, you turn them into just another piece of ass in the fish pond. Another fish in the piece of ass pond, whatever I was trying to say. And it's reprehensible. I'll be interested to see if any of the mainstream groups will repudiate this new MLC, or if for them, money speaks louder than morality.
We interrupt this program to annoy you and make things generally irritating.
All right, that sound means it's 3:20 in Denver, Colorado. That means it's 3:20 here. It's 4:20 in Denver, Colorado. It's 2:20 in Alaska. You know, the whole Alaska and Pacific time zone sells legal weed now? God, it's amazing. Let's get Michigan and get the Central time zone in on this action. We'll have legal weed in every U.S. time zone. We're back right after this. If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Law enforcement is a part of the answer. It's part of creating a climate of hostility to drug use in America.
Whatever you're smoking, it's not marijuana. The Marijuana Agenda free podcast is available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, SoundCloud, and on our Facebook page at MJ Agenda. Free video archives are available at the Radical Russ channel on YouTube. Help keep this media free by making a donation at paypal.me/radicalruss. Now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
Getting into drugs and being high is a stupid thing to do. So being in control and saying no is not the easiest thing to do. Being original and take a stand to a freak who said no. Don't let a friend push you in to taking drugs. You got it right to say no, right to say no.
This has been an actual anti-drug public service announcement. To combat this and other drug war hysteria, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at 3 p.m. Pacific at live.mjagenda.com or download the free podcast at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Activism begins with ACT. The Marijuana Agenda features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everybody. Today on the activist agenda, we want to talk a little bit about this case that I went to. You may have seen my reviews of this from the Malheur County Courthouse, and I've written up my latest piece for High Times Magazine on this, and I'd like to bring that to you right now. Medical marijuana mom beats state in court and wins back her daughter. Yesterday, well, actually, this was December 28th. Yes, December 28th, in Oregon's Malheur County Courthouse, a young single mother who uses medical marijuana to help treat psychiatric conditions convinced a judge she was neither too mentally ill nor abusing drugs, thereby winning back custody of her 1-year-old daughter after 10 weeks apart. It was a verdict few court observers, including myself, expected. And all these quotes are approximate because I wasn't allowed to record in the courtroom. The case began back in October. The scene is Vail, Oregon, a tiny farming community just a few miles from Oregon's eastern border with Idaho in Malheur County. Politically, geographically, religiously, and culturally, Malheur County might as well be an extension of conservative, pot-hating Idaho. This portion of the county, containing the county courthouse and the sheriff's department, is even within that small protuberance of mountain time zone that Oregon shares with Idaho, where you must set your clock back 30 years. Even though medical marijuana has been legal in the state since 1998, law enforcement in Malheur County has never really accepted the will of the people. In 2014, when Oregon legalized marijuana by a 56% vote, Malheur County rejected the Measure 91 by a vote of 68.7% against, more than 2/3, the greatest opposition to legalization in the whole state. So, when a young man named Cody became a registered medical marijuana grower and harvested the 12 plants he was growing for other patients and his girlfriend, a patient named Katrina, the Malheur County Sheriff's Office was none too pleased. Maybe it was the fact that his home grow is literally a block away from the sheriff's department and the county jail and 200 feet away from a preschool. Now, medical marijuana is allowed to be grown with no limits as to how close it is to a school, so everything about its grow was perfectly legal. Cody, not fully understanding that transparency with the police just makes it easier for them to build a case against you, explained how he is a legal registered medical marijuana grower in complete compliance with state law. So he invited him inside his home to see that nothing illegal was going on. It was then the cops saw what a grow house can look like when you're in the middle of a rush to harvest before the weather turns freezing. Curing cannabis was hanging from strings across the ceiling. Nutrients and fertilizer and trimming tools were all about. Piles of garbage and trim had collected throughout the home. Sure, Cody was breaking no laws regarding cannabis, but lo and behold, an unsanitary condition of the home was an immediate and pressing danger to the well-being of Katrina's little 1-year-old daughter, Kaylin. Child Protective Services was summoned and arrives at the home. They snapped 31 photographs of the condition of the home. Convinced it was an immediate danger to the child, they took Kaylin from her mother that night, frightened and screaming. During the chaos and terror of kidnapping her child, the CPS workers then convinced Katrina to sign a form releasing her mental health records to the state. And you can actually see the kidnapping. It was captured on Facebook Live by Billy Fisher from the Fight for Lily Foundation. In the passing of 10 weeks, Kaylin is kept in foster care, despite the fact that Katrina had filled out temporary guardianship papers days before the CPS raid that should have transferred custody to one of Kaylin's relatives. Malheur County sheriffs, meanwhile, began surveilling Cody's home, driving by in the wee hours of the morning to collect license plate numbers of his visitors. In one instance, a sheriff's deputy was traipsing around in Cody's backyard. When later confronted by Cody, the cop explains that he was investigating his grow, which Cody explained was a futile thing to do in the dead of winter on frozen ground. Quote, "Do you plant anything outdoors in the winter?" Cody asks, recording video on Facebook Live at the time. "Do you even understand farming?" End quote. Throughout the encounter, the sheriffs are agitating for Cody to lose his cool so they can finally have something to bust him for. But he remains calm and asserts his rights, forcing them to eventually leave empty-handed. At trial, about 20 people filled the tiny courtroom to support Katrina and Cody. At the stand were the prosecutor and the blonde CPS worker, her name is Shannon Cassad, C-A-S-A-D, who kidnapped Kaylin. Across from them were Katrina, who was representing herself since she fired her attorney, and the attorney she had fired, who was appointed by the court as guardian ad litem for Kaylin. The prosecution's case hinged on 3 points of attack. On point A, the state attempted to portray Katrina as a drug addict unable to raise her child. She'd had a lengthy history of mental health issues, for which in the past she'd been prescribed numerous psychotropic medications. She had moved to Oregon and become a medical marijuana patient for some chronic pain conditions. However, she had lapsed on using pharmaceuticals for her mental health since she had lost her insurance moving from Idaho to Oregon and turned to pot. The state hammered home statements from Katrina that pot was, quote, helping to silence the voices in my head that tell me to kill myself and kill others, quote, end quote, and that her preference would be to, quote, stay high all day long, end quote. Katrina's defense was that she had been on various medications and none of them worked for much longer than a few weeks. She hated the side effects from the drugs and the constant switching of prescriptions in an attempt to find one that lasted. Her use of marijuana is medical for her pain condition, and even though Oregon doesn't recognize marijuana's medical efficacy for mental health conditions, aside from PTSD, personal use of marijuana is legal. There was no evidence she had any other substance abuse issues or that her marijuana use affected her parenting. The point B attack was the state digging through her lengthy mental health record to paint her as an out-of-control woman racked by suicidal thoughts, depression, rage control issues, and more. It was embarrassing to listen to Shannon Cassad, the blonde CPS worker on the stand, read from an obviously cut and pasted laundry list of every possible symptom she might suffer from her various diagnoses, when few of those were listed as symptoms she'd actually suffered. Katrina's defense was Katrina herself. On the stand, she was composed and calm. As a citizen with close to no understanding of courtroom standards, she presented a wonderful case. There were times when the judge had to explain to her how to object, proper questioning of a witness, and what she can't say from the defense, but could say in testimony. And she took each direction well and adjusted perfectly. She explained that she does have some issues, but also mitigates them by having a strong family network, all of whom were in the courtroom, that helps to take care of Kaylin when Katrina needs some time to recover. The point C attack came from the 31 photographs the state took of her harvest-ridden home. Quote, it was filthy, spat Cassad. There was weed everywhere. The smell of dog urine and garbage. Sharp objects and dangerous chemicals within Kaylin's reach, and the toilet lid was open, end quote. The state took her through each photograph one by one for her to explain how everything seen was an imminent danger to the child. The state even questioned family members who reluctantly agreed that the house in that condition wasn't a safe place for an unsupervised child. Katrina's defense was that the house was a mess, but Kaylin had only been there because babysitting with her grandmother off-site had fallen through. Harvest is a messy, chaotic time, and she tried to keep Kaylin out of it, and since she couldn't, she then supervised Kaylin quite closely. In photos from before and after harvest, Katrina established that the home had been kept quite clean and safe. Katrina also did a great job poking holes in the state's evocative descriptions of potential danger. Quote, you testified that these sharp picks, trimming scissors, and marijuana were on top of the ferret cage within Kaylin's reach, she asks Cassad. Can you tell me how tall that cage is? End quote. Cassad, flustered, said she hadn't measured how tall it was. So she was asked how tall the cage came up to her relative to her own height. And she unconvincingly testified that, she had no idea. Katrina, a woman who's about 5'6", told the judge the case comes up to her chest, which is one of the times she got rebuked by the judge about testifying from the defense. But the most damaging blow came when Katrina had noted that the bottles of nutrients and fertilizer in one photograph all seemed to have child-proof caps on them. The CPS worker was forced to agree, except in the case of one plastic jug that had a standard screw lid on it, like a milk jug. Kassad emphasized that Cody had said the jug was full of fertilizer, and Kaylin's toys were scattered around these bottles, and that 1-year-olds put everything in their mouths. Katrina asked, quote, "Did you test that fertilizer to determine what was in it, that it was actually a potential harm to Kaylin?" End quote. And no, they had not tested it. That set the stage for Katrina's questioning of her boyfriend, Cody, on the stand. The fertilizer, Cody explained, is actually a probiotic compound intended to foster good bacteria in the soil that promotes healthy plants, end quote. After explaining the benefits of probiotics for a healthy gut and how there are numerous studies showing the efficacy of such compounds in treating gut diseases like Crohn's disease, Cody then dropped the bomb. Quote, "The solution is actually made from a probiotic organic honey, fruit juice, and some water," end quote. Katrina also presented evidence that Kaylin had been drug tested and came back negative for any controlled substances, including marijuana. Nobody presented any evidence that Kaylin had ever been harmed or abused. The case closed, and the judge retired to make his decision, leaving an anxious family waiting for 20 minutes after 3 full hours of testimony. The judge returned and did something that activist Sarah Frank said she'd not seen in hundreds of CPS versus marijuana moms cases that she's covered. He essentially returned that little girl to her mom in the courtroom. The judge ruled, quote, "On point A, that the mother is suffering from a substance abuse issue, the state has failed to prove its case. On point B, about the mother's mental health conditions, the state has failed to prove its case," end quote. Wow, I thought. This judge just ruled that smoking pot to cope with mental illness was no impediment to good parenting. In Eastern Oregon, in Malheur frickin' County. He continued, quote, "On point C, regarding the condition of the home, the state has proved its case. However, the defendant has shown that it isn't always the condition of the home. So, CPS, you're not going to like what I have to say, but you're going to go over to that home tomorrow at 2 p.m., and if that home is in a sanitary and safe condition, you'll return that child immediately to her mother," end quote. Usually nothing brings me more satisfaction than to see cannabophobic CPS workers losing a quarterly bonus by failing to kidnap a child. But most days, it would be seeing a pot-hating redneck cop losing his last hope of eradicating a grow site in his own neighborhood. But on Thursday, the sight of an average American family collapsing in each other's arms, weeping tears of joy for the return of their 1-year-old daughter, cousin, and granddaughter after 10 weeks of state captivity was the greatest holiday miracle I've ever experienced.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJagenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is brought to you by Cannabis Kamikaze, a professional licensed producer from Canada producing 3 pounds per light. Follow Cannabis Kamikaze on Twitter at Cannabis Kamikaze. That's at Cannabis, Kamikaze. Cannabis Kamikaze.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's time for cannabis facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
Health Cannabinoid, your ACMPR experts. Consultation services for medical cannabis. Visit healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. That's www.healthcannabinoid.com or call 1-800-906-1383. Health Cannabinoid.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am that was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
People don't smoke marijuana.
Well, yesterday, my friend and investigative journalist Angela Bacca released a new piece on Brightside, BRTside.com, and I'd encourage y'all to check it out. If you want to find the link, follow me on Twitter at @RadicalRuss. It's about 8 tweets back, but it's in my timeline. And it's an amazing piece called Cannabis in a Commodity Market. And the first thing she goes about doing is to explain what agricultural commodity markets are like. And she starts with a look at corn and how corn is a commodity that is like cannabis in some ways and unlike cannabis in some ways. If you drive across America, you're going to see that we've got a lot of corn that's growing, tons and tons of corn. And so as a commodity, though, corn isn't something that we want in a whole lot of great varieties. Right? For most people, corn is corn. You get a can of cream corn or sweet corn or corn on the cob, but it's corn. You know, nobody thinks of this particular strain of corn versus that strain of corn. So in that way, corn isn't like the cannabis commodity. Also, you have to think about how the economics of corn work in that corn doesn't make you a whole lot of money. And there are years with droughts and pestilence and such that you can lose your shirt as a corn farmer. So the U.S. government, as well as governments all around the world, subsidize corn production, right? They try to keep the market level, you know, so when there is a drought or a shortage, the farmers don't go under and then can't farm the next year when there's a profit to be made. So corn is a subsidized commodity, something we don't really expect to happen to cannabis anytime soon. Also, there's other commodities. You think like copper, she uses as an example, or oil or gold, things that are mined. But the difference between those commodities and cannabis is they are a finite resource. They're buried in the earth, and the earth ain't making no more. And we know the earth is making plenty more cannabis, so you can't really use those as a comparison. But where she gets into this discussion that I think is perfect, she says, quote, "Cannabis is not corn. As an agricultural commodity, it is closer to coffee or wine grapes. Why? A diverse market of buyers that demand uniqueness and quality. While the price of cannabis, coffee, and grapes are also set by supply and demand, quality and genetics also affect prices." And as she goes through discussing this, she discusses cloning, like, you know, the bananas, the Cavendish banana. Every yellow banana you've ever ate is a clone, identical to every other yellow banana you ever ate, genetically speaking. But for cannabis, we can price them as a commodity in one way. And if you think of wine or coffee, you can imagine Folgers and $2 Chuck. And so there is a market for that sort of commodity, this lower end, mass-produced type of agriculture commodity. But she also notes how cannabis, at the lower end of production, at the lower quality level, lower THC levels and such, tends to be a raw product that is then used in something else to make oils, to make tinctures, lotions, whatever. Somewhat similar to how corn, most of it isn't grown for us to eat like corn on the cob. Most of it is for animal feed, and the rest of it is made for high fructose corn syrup to be jammed into everything, including ketchup. Why do you got to put that stuff in ketchup, guys? Ugh, sweet ketchup. Ugh. Anyway, I digress. The cannabis market then is going to be something that's going to be a lot more like coffee or wine. And there will be room for the small scale producer. Just like with beer, there's small microbrews. With wine, there's small wineries. With coffee, there's niche coffees you can get, Sumatran and Javan and Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee and such. Or you can go get your Folgers and just drink your regular old Folgers. But in closing, the piece here by Angela says, quote, "If you are a grower, especially one who doesn't plan to specialize in higher cost, higher value specialized cannabis flowers, it is time to understand how you fit or don't in the commodity market, or you might find yourself outside of it. In the future, there will be more ways for the cannabis farmer to insulate themselves from commodity pricing, such as cash cropping and forward marketing. That's how Iowa corn farmers do it. But as long as cannabis remains federally illegal, it is not possible to utilize those strategies. Unlike other commodities, cannabis isn't sold on one singular market because it isn't exactly legal yet. As we move past state-by-state legalization and towards, hopefully, federally decriminalization, descheduling, and a commercially regulated industry, cannabis will increasingly be priced by the laws of supply and demand in a commodity market. Best to prepare now." Or as I put it a couple weeks ago, folks, the days of the $2,000 pound is over. You should start preparing for the cannabis markets of 5 years from now instead of wishing you could keep the cannabis markets of 5 years ago. Folks, that's all the time we got for today. Thanks for joining us. For everyone here at Delta 9 House and Studios, I'm Radical Russ Belville, wishing you a happy new year. Follow us on Radical Russ. Check us out at mjagenda.com.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it.